Hello, Gary. Welcome to podcast Rewinding from Montenegro. I'm glad to have you on podcast. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I hope you're doing well also, and nice to speak to you.
Yeah, you were one of the bands that dares to come to Montenegro a few years ago. It's not normal route for the touring band, but you managed to do it, and we're all glad to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it was a big thrill for us to play in Montenegro. I mean, that was our first visit, yeah. And hopefully not our last visit. We found it to be a really, really interesting place with so many cool people and so many cool things going on. And we had a really, really extraordinarily good time over there. So we hope to be able to do it again sometime.
Yeah. But Europe is like your second home. You almost every year come to play shows here. Drummer is from Belgium, right?
Yeah, we almost the whole band, well, except for me, almost the whole band resides in Europe these days. Mm-hmm. So Matt, our rhythm guitar player, is living in Cologne in Germany. Mm-hmm. And Greg is in the south of Belgium, mm-hmm. And Jonas is living in Brussels in Belgium. So when I go over there to rehearse, I usually fly into Brussels and we rehearse at a very good friend of ours place. His name is Martin, and he's actually the leader of the band called Power Stroke. Mm-hmm. And they've been on tour with us a few times in the past, and so that's kind of our home base away from home.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I know in Serbia they love you so much because you came to Serbia when no one comes to play, when there was a war, where political tension was active, and you come to play.
Yeah, and that was a very unfortunate time for that part of the world, as you know.
Yeah.
And you know, it was another case of our politicians doing a lot of their dirty business in places of the world where we have no business at all, you know. And right. But you know, we're there to project a good time and give the people some entertainment at an otherwise not so pleasant time. Yeah. And we felt a little bit of that also, considering the things that we sing about, we felt a bit of a duty to go over there and play for the people, you know, regardless of the situation, provided that we can, you know, get there and play. Yeah. And we were able to go there. So, you know, that made for a very memorable time, you know, for us and for the fans. So that was really, really cool. And, you know, Serbia always has a big place in our heart.
Yeah. And as we mentioned before, this official talk, you said that what you singing of 20 years ago is happening now, and is happening almost everywhere. This is like wartime in every sense. What's right. Your feeling about things in America last year and this election now, and whole this mix of all things that happening?
Well, I never really had much faith in the political system here, you know, and that's why I guess it was pretty hard for people to decipher which side I was on. And I'm not really on any side. I'm an independent thinker, and I never trusted the system, especially here. I still don't. You know, if there was any semblance of fairness in our system and fair politics, I think we would have reaped the benefits of that, which we haven't. you know, and a lot of it is just political small talk, and people get elected on those grounds. And we continue our downward spiral, you know, and that's really unfortunate. I think one of the great benefits of social media and of the internet these days, although the walls seem to be closing in a little bit, but one of the benefits is that people can, you know, share their thoughts and feelings about current events, and kind of try to figure this all out. And you know, I'm certainly not here to change anybody's minds about anything, and that's why I'm very careful about being preachy, and I always have been. You know, I certainly have my own opinions on things, but I respect people too much and their thoughts too much to try to convince anybody of anything.
Yeah, but do you feel like election in every country means that we all expecting better times in future? Do you think in this future that will come, do you think that things will get better in these terms of living?
Well, I think the only way for things to get better is for sort of a global awakening of what's really going on. And so these times are very, very important. I think these are very unfortunate times right now, but I think this is probably the one time in my lifetime that there's a bit of a glimmer of hope as to things turning a corner. So I think in those terms, we're at a very pivotal time, or we could potentially be. And it's just going to take a hell of a lot of people to realize that. What we're seeing, these are global events. This is not just things that are specifically happening in the United States or in Montenegro, for instance. You know, this is happening everywhere. So this seems to be there's a lot of global coordination going on here. And I think a lot of it's being done by unelected bureaucrats everywhere. And it goes into a lot of facets of business, you know, and we've reached a very dangerous place where a lot of world decisions are being made by big corporations. And, you know, we're sort of on the brink of like techno-fascism. And I think that's really, really dangerous. And we elect our politicians to not let us go in that direction. And we have to sort of try to reel in our politicians and try to get them to back up their campaign promises, for one, and to have their policies be much more beneficial to the ordinary person out there. And I think that's what we all want, you know, and that's what the people really deserve, especially when we have elections every so many years and we put our faith into these people.
Right. Like you said, it's a great times. Even nature seems through this virus is some sort of evolution, even in nature and in society. Whole world is going through some processes that will show its ways in future. But I want to ask you primarily about your band, and before Pro Pain, I want to ask you about Crumbsuckers. And you made in like 5 years ago, you made a reunion. How was it?
Yes.
Like, how was the feeling to play after all these years with guys?
You know, on one hand, it was really, really fun and cool to get together with the old guys again. And, you know, with old friends like that and old band members, you know, going back so many decades, it's when we get into a room together, it's like we've never left, you know, it's really, really wild. And so we had a lot of, you know, really funny moments and everything, I guess, that would be expected going into something like that. On the other hand, it was very difficult because not everyone's been continued the musical journey like I have. So, and I think it was especially difficult for Chris, you know, our singer, because he's been out of it for so long, and to all of a sudden take somebody that has gone off into the business world for many, many years, and to just put him on that hardcore stage again, it's got to be difficult on many levels, and also very bizarre, you know. And you know, unfortunately, it didn't lead to anything else after that. But you know, maybe that's really a good thing in terms of that's where we should have left off. You know, maybe sometimes just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, but time shows that your first album is very influential and important in crossover world. Are you aware of that today?
Yeah, I think we didn't have any expectations in that regard. We did know that we were doing something unique at the time, and you know, a lot of people had sort of chastised for it along the way, because you know, a lot of people like their hardcore served up one way, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's all fine, you know. Obviously some of the greatest hardcore is real of a purist nature, and that's the way it's always going to be. But if you want to progress, you have to bring in some new ingredients, and that's what we did. And I think it was really refreshing for the music, and especially in hindsight, you know, when you look back, you say, well, you know, the music didn't have to be so simple, and it could have taken on different paths with still having these hardcore roots and values at the core, and that's what we tried to show.
Yeah.
And you know, we were suburban guys, you know, we weren't and nor did we pretend to be, you know, urban kids. You know, we were suburban kids that primarily went to high school together, and we developed a following around Long Island, New York, which is, you know, suburbia. Yeah. And we got big really fast, you know, and things progressed at a pace that was more than we could even dream up at the time. And we were like, wow, you know, this is getting really, really popular. We're a band that, you know, named ourselves after this silly character in high school. And you know, before we even had a chance to ponder the name and take on something more serious, there we were, you know, and we were playing, you know, bigger stages all of a sudden. And it was a great learning experience. I think it was an important learning experience going into Pro Pain, because it saved me a lot of mistakes or potential mistakes. And so all those, you know, business mistakes and stuff were, not all of them, but most of them were done with my previous band, just out of naivety and sheer ignorance as to the terrible business we were trying to be a part of. And I learned from that. And so when Pro Pain had a chance to do something, I had taken everything that I'd learned, and I you know, I've at least done most of it in what I would consider to be the right way.
Yeah, and that musical improvements, is that the reason why second album of Crumbsuckers is so different than first one?
Well, that's a bit strange, because Life of Dreams was what I would consider to be like a greatest hits album between the stuff that we wrote between 1982 and 1985. And there was a tremendous amount of progression that took place in between, you know. And so this was a collection of older songs, and we had many other songs which now people can actually hear what we were doing prior to Life of Dreams on this Turn Back Time album, which came out. It came out on an album called Fuck Off or Die, I believe. I think it's an Italian label. And they worked together with one of the original singers from the Crumbsuckers, Dave Brady, who's also running the Facebook page of the band. And they got all of these early demos and things like that with Dave singing. And I thought that was a pretty important release, not because it sounds so great, but just to really hear the history of the band. And so it's from a historical perspective. That's why I feel it's sort of an important release and has its value. But after these songs were sort of discarded, and then we kept the songs that we thought were really strong, you know, like Trapped and Just Sit There, and the songs which ended up being on Life of Dreams. We were expanding musically at the time, and there was a little bit of a tug of war happening between certain factions within the band as to which direction we wanted to go. So there was like half of the band which wanted us to go into a more progressive musical direction, and another half of the band wanted us to keep it a little bit more basic, but to go in a progressive direction, but have it be a little bit more subtle and slow. And we released two very different albums, obviously. Yeah. And on one hand, I thought that was pretty cool and that we made a big statement, but it was a little too much of a progression for some to really absorb and to sort of wrap their head around, you know?
Yeah. But result of the ending of Crumbsuckers was that Pro Pain was born. From the start, I have a feeling that you move away from all that New York hardcore scene, and you pick your own path in representation of music, of delivery of the sound, in every terms. Even today, in every speaking of New York hardcore, you of course mentioned, but you somehow move away from that.
Well, I'm firmly grounded in New York hardcore because that's really where, it's not where I started as a music fan, but it's where I started as a musician. You know, I started in the New York hardcore scene, and taking the Long Island Railroad into Manhattan every weekend, and going down to CBGB's and visiting all the famous record shops, and hanging out outside and making a lot of friends, and so this went on for quite a few years, you know, but I think there are better ambassadors for New York hardcore. You know, this is the city guys, the agnostic front guys, the sick of it all guys, and I come from a more crossover scene, if you will. I mean, I didn't coin the phrase. When the Crumbsuckers were playing, it was just called hardcore. But the press is, you know, they're always looking for something different to sort of exploit, and crossover was sort of the term du jour, if you will, and it was sort of a subgenre. And the problem with too many subgenres is, you know, I mean, hardcore, it's not the biggest form of music as a whole, but if you start dividing it into these little subgenres and everyone has their preference of that, oh, I like this, but I don't like that. I think it does a tremendous disservice to the music as a whole, because you're splitting it up, you know.
Right.
You're balkanizing the scene.
Yeah.
And I don't like to use that phrase, but it's in essence, it's really what it is. The music version of that.
Yeah.
But getting back to your question, you know, I realize where that the hardcore scene is where I came from, and I'm certainly very proud of that. But it's not something that I don't want to always wear the New York hardcore thing on my sleeve, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that with Pro Pain, you know, we made enough of a statement for heavy music. It's not purist hardcore, you know. It's we have a lot of different elements, you know, lead guitars and some of the things that the Crumbsuckers, you know, brought into the scene. So again, you know, as far as the scene having its ambassadors, I never felt like I'm the guy for that. There are other guys that rightfully should be doing that.
Yeah, but everyone calls Pro Pain a hardcore band, and I hear all the time that Agnostic Front called crossover band today, because they
okay,
and double pedals and stuff like that. So I think that hardcore evolved even with those old bands that should be pure, like there is a pure hardcore. So it's all mixed up pretty well, but Pro Pain is still hardcore band. And
right.
do you realize at the beginning that your career will be after Crumbsuckers this long with such a great discography and albums?
No, even in some of the earliest interviews, we never imagined Pro Pain lasting this long. And I think in those days we made those statements due to the amount of turmoil and sheer insanity of our touring life at the time. And we just couldn't imagine going full speed at the rate we were for that much longer. Something had to sort of implode or something had to change. And so there were a lot of changes that took place. And, for better or worse, I think speaking for lineup changes, we certainly haven't been immune to them. But I think every band member has brought something important and legit to the table of this band, and it really helped in terms of the development as to where we are now. And we're lucky we never had so much strife in the end with the band members. There's no backstabbing. It's like a big family, and we have a lot of respect for one another. I'm still in touch with almost all of the guys, and so we're sort of blessed in that regard. We've been able to steer away from a lot of the bullshit, internally. Yeah. And it's made the band stronger, in a lot of regards. And a lot of the ex-members, they have a lot of respect for the current members in the band, and vice versa. I think that's really healthy for the band moving forward.
That's really great and unique. And also, my sense is that you move away from that bullshit of music business. You're easy to reach. You go on tour with a lot of bands. You help a lot of bands that played with you. Right. So you're almost like famous but DIY band.
Yeah, well, that's true. I think the DIY approach is it's a very honorable way to go about the music business.
Yeah.
But if you really want to get somewhere, and in terms of any sort of commercial potential, or in terms of numbers, maybe I shouldn't use the word commercial, but I think it's important to have some resources behind you, because that's just a unfortunate reality of this business. And maybe more so in the past. These days, through the internet, things can be a little bit easier in certain regards, but they can be more difficult in other regards, because a lot of those old corporate dollars are not available anymore, as a lot of indie labels have gone out of business, and a lot of them are really struggling because we're all trying to sell a product which is largely antiquated, which is the CD. So now I think this was the first year where vinyl sales have taken over CD sales, which is, on one hand, that's great, but it's not like vinyl sales are going through the roof. So I think it just, if nothing else, it just shows you how abysmal CD sales are at the moment.
Yeah. And in all that changes over the years, for you, what's the period that you like the most, or you enjoyed the most in your career?
Wow, that's really hard to say. I think that well, I was still enjoying everything up till this year, you know, and it's the one thing that keeps, I think, most bands going, is that there's enjoying what they're doing. You know, I think that's really important, and I think that with a lot of artists, they say, well, you know, they're in it for the money. I think that's a cliche that's often overused and doesn't really, it holds some value, but not really too much, because I think every artist, you know, within every artist, there's a certain amount of artistic integrity, and it's just bands. Some bands write more commercially accessible music than others.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that the commercial artist doesn't have those songs in their heart, you know. And so you do what you want. And we certainly have, and the journey has been as satisfying from the beginning as it was until this year, when we sort of had to shut down everything, you know. So I don't really prefer one period of the band over another. These days we have great people in the band, and we get along extremely well, and we enjoy being on stage together. So we're really looking forward to coming back, you know.
Yeah, I saw the other guys playing nonstop, putting their videos to social media. Have you written yet a new album?
No, I haven't written a new album yet, but I'm working on it. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, wait a second. You can see my little, in the background, you can see my little jam setup. I have like a jam hub. I got some guitars out there. I got a Roland drum set up so that we don't have to annoy the neighbors all the time. But, you know, we're at the point now where I'm collecting a lot of ideas, potential song ideas and titles, and compiling a lot of riffs. I'm not to the point yet where I'm arranging songs. I wait to a certain stage for that. I want to make sure that I have all the riffs that I need, and a lot of really good ideas for songs, you know. And if you have good ideas for songs, the rest of it kind of flows pretty quickly, you know. Then I think it's just a matter of a month or two to really arrange things and nail down the lyrics and put the final screws on the writing process. But I think that the writing will probably be wrapped up by the end of the year, and we'll be ready to either go into the studio or figure out how we're going to go about the recording process come January.
Yeah, that's really great. So there will be an album, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Among the other albums, great albums, I want to ask you about one specifically. That is a Run for Cover. Great, one of the best rock and roll cover albums I ever heard. Do you plan anything like that? When I speak to people, a lot of them thought the same and speak about that album like one of the great covers ever.
Oh, okay. Well, I would love to do that, because we took it on as a fun project because we thought we really needed it at the time, and we got to a point where we were just writing one studio album after the other, and we were releasing them like year after year, and there was this sort of monotony that we felt that we had to break at the time.
Yeah,
and that's also one of the reasons that the band took a little bit of a melodic turn around 2008 and 2009. It's just that we needed a break from the norm. So, you know, those, despite the cover album and like an album like No End in Sight being completely different artistically, I thought they were sort of equally as important for us at the time, and to assure further longevity with the band, so that we can get back to what we're supposed to be doing, you know. And going back to the cover album, I'd love to do another, like maybe a run for cover 2 or something. The only problem with or potential problem with doing something like that, I mean, we could absolutely do like a self-release on it or something. I don't know how many labels would be interested in putting something like that out, because even in with the best studio album we could write, you know, that's really only, or realistically only going to be good for X amount of sales, you know, on its best day, which is something. But if we do a cover album, you know, then we're talking probably 25% of that. And I think that most labels would see that as maybe too risky.
Yeah.
Maybe they would release it under certain terms, but we would probably end up giving it away. So I think it's a great idea, but and maybe there will be a time and a place for something like that again. We'll see what happens.
I know people would be thrilled to hear the continuing of that.
Thanks.
For the end, I gotta ask you one question that I need to ask you, because people ask me how you preserve your voice, how you take care of your voice.
Well, sometimes it's not so easy, you know. As you get a bit older, you lose certain vocal capabilities that you had when you were younger. It's just no matter how well you take care of your voice, and that's why we hear some of the real great singers struggling to achieve that greatness that they once had, and I'm sure they're really trying as hard as they can. It's just not really there anymore because of all the abuse that their vocal cords have taken through time and with all the shows. And so to a certain extent, my vocal cords have also been pretty battered, but I think I can still deliver upwards of 90% of what I was capable of doing in better vocal times. I have a pretty good vocal regimen when I rehearse for tours, so I don't take on too much too soon. So I just start off by singing a couple of songs, and then maybe taking the next day off, and then I'll come back and I'll do 3 or 4, and I'll really work my way into a full set. And so by the time I'm ready to rehearse with the guys, I've already done about 2 weeks worth of singing. And then when the band gets together, we're ready to rehearse full sets. And so I don't just go in cold and then they just completely blow my voice out, because if that happens, and you're screaming every night, it's really hard to get it back once it goes.
Right.
And I've experienced that quite a bit when I would get sick on tour. Like if I would come down with bronchitis or something, which I'm really prone to. I mean, when you're touring, and usually in the winter season, and you're sometimes sharing microphones with people, and it's just and you're in tight quarters with people traveling all the time. Right. It's really, really difficult, if not impossible, to stay away from. So, you know, if you don't get sick, that's like a miracle. But when you do get sick, that's the big problem. And so, and when I start having these big vocal problems, you know, be it due to bronchitis or whatever, it's really, really difficult to come out of. And it just seems like it just continues to snowball downhill, and you feel helpless, you know. Like as a vocalist, you always feel like your voice is like your secret weapon, you know, and you want to be able to deliver that. Because without that, I'm just playing bass on stage, you know. And so when it's the most frustrating feeling if you can't deliver your vocals the way they should be delivered.
Yeah, and you can't say to people, I can't do it, I can sing tonight because I'm sick.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can be gracious enough where in the end you mention like, hey, you know, I've been battling something, but it's a very fine line, because you don't want to give any excuses.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. Gary, thank you very much for this talk. We could go for hours, but this is for the first time.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for your time. I hope to see you soon in Europe.
Yeah.
Montenegro.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and we'll save the next chat for our return to Montenegro.
Yeah. Take care and all the best.
Thanks. Take care.